Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vidya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matrarupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. So Mark, can you remind us where we are in the text?
We're on Shloka 51 on page 435.
Can you help us out, please, Dinesh? Let's check.
Siddhasyesha sthiti prokta sadhakasyoच्यते shruno yatha yatha tatparasya tha vismritiruchritaha purnasya vismritirnasti mithya jnanam prayatnataha. This is declared as the state of the accomplished one among the middling knowers of the self, about the state of one who is practicing the means that is being told. As much as he may be absorbed in the selves, so much would non-forgetfulness be increasing. But for the accomplished one, there is no forgetfulness. Knowledge of the false object occurs out of effort by their own will. No, even among the middling ones, the person who has perfected his samadhi is placed in a higher position in this verse.
So if you are of the lower class of jnanis, your knowledge is tenuous. That's what I call that yo-yo state. Sometimes you know it and you forget, And when you forget, you're like any other fool. But then your knowledge returns and all that ignorance gets blasted. So you are an Aura Brahman. This middling class, your knowledge is steady. Mind for them stays absorbed in samadhi. Never forget this deep introversion all the time. For them, there's no effort in remembering who they are. Never forget. Going on.
उत्तमस्य पुनर्ब्रह्मन् समाधि व्यवहारयोः न भेदो लेशतोऽप्यस्ति यतो विस्मरणं सदा Brahmana. Again, for the highest one, there is not even a little difference in their state between samadhi or absorption in the self and actions in the world, since there is non-forgetfulness of the self at all times.
So there's a very interesting conversation in the book I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. The student, the disciple says, are you in samadhi all the time? And Nisargadatta says, of course not. So the highest state of knowledge, or we can say he has what we call sahaja samadhi, or natural or continuous samadhi. That's very interesting because in this particular scripture, those deeply lost in complete absorption where you have almost no perception of the world, is the middling state. The highest state for them is you have diverse mind, you can function in the world, you can go into samadhi, you cannot go into samadhi. But you never lose knowledge of yourself. Contrast that with Yoga Vasishtha in the 7 stages of knowledge. And they kind of reverse it. In that scripture, the highest is those who are so absorbed they barely notice the world at all. Beings like Anandamayi Ma, or Ramakrishna, just getting lost. But I like to remember what Ramana Maharshi said. A disciple asked him, of these 7 stages of knowledge, to which one does the Jivan Mukta, does the man of realization belong? Bhagavan says, to the 4th. And then the disciple says, then why have 3 more superior to it been described in the scripture? And Bhagavan says, these are not states of bondage or release. These have to do with the experiences of the realized person. And they are due to his karma. They are not to be achieved by mere will or effort. In fact, if you're making efforts to have some sort of a whack out state, because you have this idea, I need to get more, be more blissed out, blah, 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 blah. You're not even a jnani, you're still struggling. The mark of the man of knowledge is that he's given up efforts. Make peace of mind. The Mahasiddhi, the great accomplishment. How deep your samadhi is as you move through life, leave that up to the Lord. Mostly these scriptures are about those of us in ignorance trying to understand the behavior of the Mahatmas that we come in contact with. Any thoughts on this? Now, you may be simply led to plunge deep into samadhi. You can't help it. You just got to go there. Jai, what a blessed state. Or you may be of diverse mind. Jai, what a blessed state. Mark of a man of wisdom is he has ceased to make efforts. This kartavya is gone. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Yasamadhiparo madhya tasya ya vispriti sthita seshan lana bhaven mithya jnana bhumishu bhusura yastu tamopi swachanda ya prarabdhavasho piva pashato piva samadhya tatparo bhuya tasmat tasyam lana pavispritihi. Brahmana, for the middling one who is devoted to samadhi or absorption in the self, that non-forgetfulness which exists will be slightly faded in situations of knowledge of false objects. But for that highest one, who may not be exclusively devoted to samadhi on account of his own freedom of will or under the influence of his prarabdha karma, the non-forgetfulness of the self would nevertheless be unfaded.
So here they're inferring that the one who is fond of samadhi has a slight bit of forgetfulness when they're required to interact with the world. I'm not so sure about that. And again, it's not A, B, C, clear delineations. These are just a map, gradation. So to summarize, what's important is, do you know who you are? Don't worry about if it's lower samadhi, higher samadhi, salvikalpa samadhi, don't worry too much about that. Learn to be able to introvert the mind enough so that at least at moments in your meditation, you can taste the bliss of your own self-nature, so that you can prove to your mind two things. First and foremost, I'm not a person in that space of consciousness. I'm not even an enlightened person. I'm the space of consciousness. Second, I finally know where happiness is. Happiness is the mind free from its sangraha, its attachment, from its kama, its craving, its spriha, its longing. Let go, let go. Now, you may be intuitively led to do a practice. Ganesh was telling me last week. Can I share about your power breath thing?
Sure.
Yeah. You explain it, because I forget exactly what you said. This was just something that arose intuitively, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Explain it.
Well, the body just took over and started doing some breathing stuff, and the energy just moved to the top of the head.
But you didn't start with the idea, gee, I want to have a spiritual experience, did you?
No.
You just let it do what it did.
Yeah.
Likewise, sometimes I'll go through the day and I'm just smitten by the Lord. I can't help it. I'm gone. And it can be the strangest places. I can be on the bus. You may enjoy sitting in the morning in meditation. I certainly do. But none of these things add to one's knowledge of the self once you see it. And I've had several people who are pretty well rooted in knowledge, and they go on meditation retreats, 10 days, meditating 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Frequently, when they come back, I'll say, do you know any more self than you did before? No, Jim. Did you have some interesting mind states, or did you remove a lot of mind? Yeah. And that will pass too. Mark of the man of wisdom is he sees the temporary and unreal nature of mind itself. There's no striving, no struggling anymore. Any thoughts on this out in Zoom land? Next verse.
Vastutah shrunu bhudeva madhyamottamajnaninam karmanevasti yat kinchat yataste purnatam gataha samvid atmatiriktam yan samvid atmatiriktam yat na te pashyanti kinchana. Brahmana, listen. In reality, for the middling and the highest sages, possessed of self-knowledge, there is surely no karma whatsoever, since they have arrived at the state of accomplishment. They do not see anything which is different from the self that is pure consciousness. Note, this and the following verses would suggest even the absence of prarabdha karma for the middling and the highest sages possessed of self-knowledge. The continuance of prarabdha would then apply only to the lowest class of sages possessed of self-knowledge.
Yes. So what I want to do is take a bit of a detour here and briefly go through a section from v51, which is titled, Is There Prarabdha Karma for the Saint? And it starts off reviewing the three kinds of karmas that the scriptures talk about: sanchitta karma, agami karma, and prarabdha karma. Sanchitta karma, the karmas of the past which have yet to fructify. So in some prior life, you set something up as a chain of causation, some form of, I'll be happy when, it would be better if. But in this particular life, you have the wrong equipment. So it's still in its potential state. That's sanchitta karma. Agami karmas, karmas of the future, which we set in place this lifetime. Gee, I wish I had been born a white guy in California. oh, I wish I'd been born in the Himalayas. It would have been so much better. Agami karma, future. Both of those are roasted in realization. It isn't going to be any better. If you look up and you see a cloud that's long and thin, or you see a cloud that's big and fluffy, it's not you. You have nothing left. So all that's left is the now, the karma of this life. This body moves through. Guess what happens when your prarabdha karma has run out? You die. Now, the mark of the man of wisdom is that he does not identify with the body. Prarabdha only refers to the activities and the actions and reactions at the level of the body. The self has no prarabdha karma. Man of realization is identified as the self. So in fact, he has no prarabdha karma. It's only of the body. Then Shankara goes on and say, can you really even imply cause and effect for something that's a dreamlike appearance? So I had a dream that I was in this old broken down church and the wood kept crumbling as I was trying to climb over something like that. So something had caused the walls of the church to crumble, cause and effect. When I woke up, was there any cause and effect in the dream that was real? So you see, there's no prarabdha of any kind for the man of wisdom. Then why do the scriptures put forward the idea of prarabdha? It's for ignorant people to explain the behavior of the Mahatma. Now, there are schools of thought in Hinduism that imply that realization means all the karmas are gone, and so there's no body of any kind. There's only videho moksha, only liberation beyond the body. If you've got a body, you're not liberated. We at Advaitins say, no, we put forward the doctrine of being jivan mukta, liberated. But for the man of knowledge, he is videho moksha, videho mukti. He is beyond. Now, that's Shankara's very succinct way of putting it forward. Let's see how this scripture approaches it. Next verse, please.
Karma shesham katham shishyed yatah sarvam chidagnina bhasmi kritam astesham nakinchit parishishyate. How can any residual karma be left remaining since everything has been turned to ashes by the fire of consciousness? Therefore, not even little karma is left remaining for them.
Yes. So there is no karma left. Yet the body is seen to go through its allotted dose of gains and losses, success and failures in the world. Seen but not real. The truth, though, is nobody's self is ever really touched by karma. Just like as vivid as the dream is, you, the waker, are safe in your bed, never really touched. Now, how do I prove this to myself? Whatever goes on, positive or negative in life, stop for a moment, tune up the mind, introvert your attentive faculty, and notice if you've ever changed. Once you've gotten that glimpse of your self-nature, you see under all circumstances, just the empty space of consciousness itself. Next one.
ऐन्द्रजालिक कर्मेव इतरैरेव दृश्यते शृणु ब्रह्मन् रहस्यन्ते प्रवक्ष्यामि समासतः. Like the action of a magician, it is only seen by others. Here, Brahmana, I shall tell you the secret briefly.
So, again, if you're an illusionist who does sleight of hand, Aindrajalika, I think that was the term you used?
Yeah, Indrajala.
Indrajala. So the idea here is if there's some dude on the street corner and he plays his flute and a rope comes out of the basket, goes up into the sky, and then he climbs up the rope, and then poof, he's down there at the bottom, and then puts out a basket to collect coin. Then someone who's behind him, who's not affected by the hypnotism, just sees a dude playing the flute. But those who are in front of him, he's got some siddhi that he's accomplished, being able to temporarily hypnotize the crowd. So, ordinary folk are hypnotized by Ishvara's Maya. The man of wisdom is not hypnotized by it. He sees nothing, touches the self. All this like a picture show. Next one.
Shivasya trishisaiva jnaninam drishtiruchyate nasti bhedo leshatopi satyam etanna samshayah tasman na kinchit karmapi jnaninam anuvartate. Of what nature is the perception of Shiva? That alone is said to be the perception of sages possessed of self-knowledge. There is no difference, even a little, between them. This is true, there is no doubt. Therefore, not even a little karma continues for sages possessed of self-knowledge after their self-realization.
Yes. Nothing touches me. So this is the vision of the infinite of Lord Shiva. I am Kutusta, still, unmoving. This marvelous picture show appears. always changing. This is the experience of the middling and the highest jhanas. Going on.
इति श्रुत्वा सवसुमान् हेमाङ्गदनिरूपितं सर्वसन्देहनिर्मुक्तो विज्ञानविषदाशयः पूजितो राजपुत्राद्यैः स्वं स्थानं प्रत्यपद्यत. Thus, having heard what was ascertained by Hemangada, that Vasuman, freed from all doubts, having a clear mind arising from knowledge, and worshipped by the princes and others, went towards his place.
Okay, so this ends the story of that.
Hemangada.
Yeah. Is that the? Are we still back in the story of the?
That was Hema. This is Hemangada, right? That's Hemachuda.
No, I'm thinking of the Brahmin demon.
Vasuman? I don't know. which story.
Anyway, I get so confused with him. So this guy, he goes off. He's got his doubts resolved. That's what I get for doing 4 or 5 classes a week. I forget what story I'm in. Going on.
Praptau Swanagaram Rajaputra. Praptau Swanagaram Rajaputra. प्राप्तौ स्वनगरं राजपुत्र अपि ततः परम् एवं श्रुत्वा पुनः रामः पप्रच्छात्रिसुतं मुनिम्. Therefore the princes also reached their city. Thus having heard, Rama again asked the sage, the son of Atri.
So again, Ram is going back to this is Parashurama is again asking the Dattatreya to clarify more. This is the literary device just to wrap up these concluding, summarizing shlokas. Going on.
Shrutam etadhi vijnanam guru tvanmukhanirgatam vinashto mama sandeho viditam tanmahatpadam. Revered Guru, this knowledge which has come out of your mouth has indeed been heard. My doubt has disappeared. A great state of knowledge has been understood.
So it seems Parashurama has had his doubts resolved. Now this is an important verse because it deals with the question, how long should I continue to do practices? And the answer is this: we continue to do practices until doubts cease to arise. Our doubts get resolved in 2 ways. First, paroksha jnanam, the indirect knowledge. You read it in scripture, you hear it from the Guru. But then through our own logical reasoning and our own direct experience, we get aparoksha jnana, direct experience. If doubt arises, do more tapas. It's real simple. For the doubts cease to arise. Listen carefully. In the end, what finally makes the doubts stop arising is when you see the fundamentally illusory nature of the mind itself. When you quit believing the mind. You can't think the real fault. Your doubt isn't real, and no answer I can give you is real. What's real? You. You're the only thing that's real. Brahma Satyam Jagam Nitya. What is the Jagat? All phenomena, gross and subtle, without exception, including your own body, mind, and intellect. All Nitya. Only the self is real. Next verse.
सर्वानुस्यूत संवित्तिम् अत्रात्मा भाति सर्वतः तथापि भवता प्रोक्तम् अविद्यः सर्वमेव तु संक्षेपेण पुनर्ब्रूहि विज्ञानं सारवत्तरं धारयतिव्यं मे Guru Sarvatmana Maya. The self that is mere consciousness, woven together with everything, shines everywhere. Even then, tell me again briefly all the quintessential knowledge explained by you from the beginning, in order that it should be retained by me completely.
Yeah. So Parashurama, he gets it, he understands it, he feels totally free, but he sure likes listening to the Tathya. Only support. Let's see what the Tathya says.
Itya Prishtasaramena Punah Prahatrinandana Shrunu Rama Pravakshyami Sarvasaratamam Punah. Thus asked by Rama, the son of Atri again said, "Here, Rama, I shall tell you again all that is most essential."
All right, so another summarization going on.
Yachiti parameshani purnahantamayi para sa swatantriyabhi swatantriyabhidama ya shakti mahatmyatah sada jagada bhasayed nunam durghatai kavidhayinah pratibimba padaadarshe tat prakaram shrunukramat. That supreme consciousness, consisting of I consciousness, which is whole, the supreme ruler through the greatness of the power of Maya, called freedom of will, performing only the impossible, can always certainly manifest in the world in herself, like the reflection in a mirror. Here the manner of that manifestation in due order. Note, I consciousness is self-awareness turned away from objects and resting in its own natural state. When it is turned towards objects, it is divided and resting on itself, it is whole or purna.
And inherent in that I consciousness, which is Tripura, which is Brahman, is Maya Shakti, this inherent power of the infinite to seemingly fork into subject, object. The fact of our direct experience is I see stuff. Vedanta never contradicts our direct experience. But the question is, what am I seeing? Vedanta thunders, it's just nama rupa, it's name and form, appearing in consciousness. The term used in this verse, pratibimba, like images in a mirror. So a good-looking guy like Ganesh looks in the mirror. I go in, ugly old fat guy looks in the mirror doesn't reject me, thank God. It reflects everything and nothing changes. It's always just the mirror. So also, whatever names and forms occur in your field of experience, you never change. And neither does the self in anyone else. It's all okay. Brahma Satyam Jagan Nitya. Brahman alone is real. Phenomenal world. Nitya. Chit-chaya. The shadow or the reflection of consciousness. Pratibimba, like an image in a mirror. All these various terms. Next one.
या सा पराचितिः पूर्णाहं भावब्रह्मिता स्वातन्त्र्यवशत् स्वात्मरूपं द्वेधा प्रभासयात्. That supreme consciousness which is whole, grown by the wholeness of eye consciousness, made its own natural state appear in two parts to the power of its freedom of will.
So here he is talking about this inherent Maya Shakti by which the impossible seems possible. Consciousness is sthita, still. Vijnana Ghanam, one homogeneous mass of consciousness. Yet it seems to fork into subject-object, though it never moves. How the impossible seems possible. That to me is my favorite definition of Maya. Why, Jim? Just it's nature. Going on.
तत्रैकांशेभ्यहं भावो पूर्ण आभासितो यदा तदा द्वितीयभागस्त अहं भावविनिर्गतः बाह्यम् अव्यक्त Bahyam avyaktamam bhavat. Bahyam avyaktam abhavat. Tadrishyaiva Rugudvaha apurnaham bhavayuta esha prokta sadashivaha. Descendant of Brighu, in that natural state, when incomplete or divided eye consciousness was manifested in one part, then the second part, gone out of that incomplete or divided eye consciousness, became the unmanifest, avyakta, outside, which is the basis of the external universe, only in the view of that incomplete or divided eye consciousness. Okay, sorry.
Let me see if I can explain it a little easier. So this is not just philosophy. This is the author's, Dattatreya's, attempt to explain what one sees when the mind returns from nirvikalpa samadhi. So the mind thunders to a stop. That sense of individuality is gone. The world is not available. Then coming back from samadhi, whoa, just the raw stuff of creation. Here the scripture uses the word prakriti. First waves out of the self. From that, all the other stuff takes form. So the man of realization sees that this world is nothing but consciousness. It's nothing but Brahman. It's a light show. It's a hologram. It's not solid and real. But if you narrow the attentive faculty and really get intent on it, it appears more and more concrete. And at some point it becomes so concrete that in the mind you forget. You think you're a person and all this stuff is pretty damn real. But it's just like the difference between an imagination and a dream. Both are just fancies of the mind. But in the dream, I think it's real. It's all the difference. Next verse.
Satam avyakta bhagam tu pashyan bhinnam api swatah ahametad ditya bhedat anusandhi para sada. That Sadashiva, though seeing that unmanifest part as different from him, became always engrossed in the contemplation. I am this, non-differently. Note, the commentator adds that the followers of the Upanishads call the unmanifest power alone by the words avidya or maya, avidya, ignorance, or maya, elusive power, and the rest.
So it's the same thing that he's going on, using various explanations, not only from the Vedanta literature, but some of the Tantrika stuff. the Sadashiva stuff is from other sources. I don't want to get into all that. Keep it simple. You are an eternal, constant entity. You are the one entity. You are not a person. Your experience of I is not a part of God. It's the totality of Brahman. Little old me, yeah. How big is yourself? Actually, it has no dimension. But peeping through the human intellect, the vijnana maya kosha, the subtlest part of the equipment, all this is spread before you. If you wish a clearer explanation of this, I invite you to go to v51 and the discussion of the Pancha Kosha, the 5 koshas, and review the section on the Vijnana Maya Kosha. And in it consists of the buddhi, the subtle form of the organs of perception, and what we call the karta, the doer. In it is this function that attributes to the self qualities of the not self. So it seems like I, Jim, got up this morning and I made myself coffee and I took the bus over to Piedmont to meet my friend Eric. And I had a veggie burrito for lunch and I came home and I did the dishes and I'm doing class. So the body is moving through this dream world, having perceptions, thoughts, feelings, and memories. And this Vijnana Maya Kosha ties it all together. For the man in ignorance, he thinks that's his self. But for the man of wisdom, that's ever before him, he sees it as another function in the equipment. Not evil, it's just not you. It's a wonderful, wonderful exegesis to go through that. Highly recommend. How all that stuff happens. Don't get too caught up. Just stay with your direct experience. When your mind is very quiet and your attention is turned inward, can you find a thing called an individual? Remembering that if it has a quality or a characteristic, if it begins and ends, most importantly, if it can be objectively known, that's the equipment. That's not you. It rises like a dream, disappears like a dream. Next verse.
स एव भूयस्यात्तन्य स एव भूयस्वातन्त्र्य अतिसृक्षुर्विविधं जगत् अव्यक्तमात्मनो देहम् एतद्देवाहमास्थितः इत्येवम् अनुसन्धान पर ईश्वर आबभौ अव्यक्तम् अभिमानेन अविष्ट ईश्वर एव तु. That Sadashiva alone, out of his freedom of will, in the form of I consciousness, desiring to create the diverse world, and seeing his body, that is the unmanifest, was absorbed in the contemplation. This alone am I abiding in. Then that Sadashiva alone, shown as Ishvara, that Ishvara alone has entered the unmanifest with his eye sense. Note, the commentator adds, Sadashiva is the one who contemplates with the preponderance of consciousness as I am this. Ishvara is one who contemplates with the preponderance of the unmanifest as this I am.
So I wouldn't get too hung up in this. This is again part of this particular tradition's cosmology. I like the model, the paradigm that's in Mandukya much better. It's simpler. The ground of being is Brahman. The phenomenal world, the Jagat, is the physical body of God. The total mind, Hiranyagarbha, the thoughts and feelings, is the subtle body of God. The total vasana is Ishvara. He who wishes, he who wills. That's the causal body of God. It's not broken down into Sadashiva and Ishvara and all that kind of stuff. Keeps it simple. And the ground of being is Brahman. And the Ishvara, the Hiranyagarbha, and the Jagat, they rise and they fall, they come and they go. They big bang, big crunch, big bang, big crunch. But consciousness remains the same. Likewise, you have a physical body. You have a subtle body, thoughts and feelings, with an equal sense. You have a causal body, your unconscious impressions. But behind all of that is the witnessing consciousness. Chidakasha, the space of awareness itself. Now, that witnessing consciousness in you, Atman, and that ground of being of the whole universe, Brahman. I am Atma, Brahma. They are the same thing. Next one.
Tritha samabhavat rudra haridruhila rupatah drishtrishyamaharashi samudaya bhavasakah vidhayo vividha asam tatha tadrupa samsthitaah Bahavo harayo vyasam tatsamhara parayanaha anekesho bhavan rudra evamesha jagad vidhi. That Ishvara alone became divided in three ways in the form of Rudra, Hari, and Brahma. The Brahmas who manifest the multitude of great masses or universes perceivable by the seer are various. So even Haris or Vishnus on account of whom the form of the universes was settled were many. Thus Rudras intent on destruction of the worlds were in large numbers. This is the mode of creation of the worlds. Note, the commentator mentions that Ishvara, by his freedom of will, causing the unmanifest to become manifest, variously with the three gunas or qualities or energies, sattva, rajas, and tamas, entered the innumerable divided entities within his divided eye consciousness and became innumerable threefold entities named Rudra, Hari, and Brahma, who carry out the functions of destruction, preservation, and creation, respectively.
Well, and I would actually go a little bit further. So these are the three principles we see operating always in the world of name and form. Things come into being, the principle of origination. Things hang out for a while, the sustaining principle. Then entropy sets in, they fall apart. But the other thing that's so cool about this verse is it implies multiverses. Maybe they're thinking of sequential, universe after universe after universe. Hinduism tends to look at cosmology not as linear, but circular. But it could also be interpreted that there are simultaneously all sorts of other universes going on. The point being, Ishvara has no limits to what it can create. And this is what's so cool about the theoretical physicists who are dealing in the world of mathematics. You know, they're positing 10 dimensions and multiverses and universes that come into being for just a short fraction of a second and then they go out of existence and stuff like that. You just start contemplating things like, where did the Big Bang come from? And your head just goes, and what yoga says, all of it, by spontaneous, causeless, purposeless free will, just arises in consciousness. That's why I like the movie Inception. Now, I have never seen The Matrix, but I guess that maybe that does it too. But Inception, it's like a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, all these different worlds. Now, it breaks down because they posit that there's a waking state you can get back to. Vedanta would say, no, all just dreams. All just dreams. World to world to world. And isn't that really our direct experience? Can you really say that your memory of last year is any different than your memory of your last dream? So is now, eternal now. Next one.
evam vidham jagat tattvam tarpana pratibimbavat bhasate kevalam rama hijatum tu kinchana. Rama, the essential nature of the world is of this kind. Like the reflection in a mirror, it merely appears, but nothing indeed is produced.
Yes. So he sums up all this cosmology. The essential conclusion is this world appears like images in a mirror. Nothing is really manifested or produced. It just seems that way. It is like a dream. A very long and very vivid. But you be a lucid dreamer. You be woke. All right, one more.
Parachite prapurna aham bhava rupaiva sarvada sthitapyaneka sampurna aham bhava paribramhita. The supreme consciousness, though existing always in its natural state of whole or undivided eye consciousness alone, is also divided, grown all around with the divided eye consciousness filling the creation.
So we have Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without qualities. Then we have Saguna Brahman, Brahman with qualities. I was talking with a student yesterday and he says, oh, Jim, I want to see the cosmic form, Saguna Brahman. What else do you think you're looking at? It's not you're going to see anything different. You're going to know Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma Sarvam Idam. All this Kalu verily is Brahman. Like a transparency. Just hanging at the whole of brain. Really big. Seen, but not real. Something there is that is real. Brahma Satya. Brahman or sound. Real. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.